So I'm getting fairly close now to sending this frame away for sandblasting and powder coating, but there's a few more mods to be made. I want to cut off these horn brackets, there's one on each side. There's also a bracket here for the steering dampener connection to the frame. I'll cut that off. I've decided to do away permanently with the center stand, just go with a side stand. So I'll cut off these big ugly brackets here and leave as little as possible. All that can be done once the frame's completely bare and on the ground. There's also some extra welding I've left off on the rear subframe, which I wanted to leave until the frame was completely bare and I could turn it upside down and do the welds that way. Now, more importantly, I've decided to do away with the standard headlight. The headlight itself is pretty good, but the bucket it's in is pretty big and ugly, and it just doesn't suit the look I'm going for. So that means I'm going to pretty much have to rework a lot of the electrics and move things around. Now that will probably mean I'll need some extra tabs here and there, so I really want to get the frame finalised before I send that away. So let me show you what's going on with the electrics. So here's the harness and the headlight bucket. All the stuff goes in the headlight. You've got ignition switch, which on the RT was on the dash, I believe, originally, but I've since retrofitted this to the traditional position, sticking out the headlight through the mount hole here. That was the traditional position for all non-fairing BMWs. So it's got that, it's got the flasher unit, which is this guy. It's got the relay for the headlight, it's got the headlight connector, and it's got this big connection board, which is just a connection point for all the wiring, so you can remove harnesses independently. But it's also got two fuses in there, and there's also a diode in the back here. It's certainly a pain for me because I've got to pull all this stuff out and without destroying the bucket. I've got to detach all those wires, feed them through somehow through these little holes and reconnect them all back up again. Luckily the BMW is smart enough to have this board's all color coded. It's relatively easy. You know where all the wires go by the wiring colors. Now, of course, removing this bucket and just going to a regular headlight leaves me with the problem of what to do with this guy here. It's got two fuses in it. There's only two fuses on this whole bike, surprisingly enough. Rather than rewire the whole thing, I thought I might be able to mount this under the tank. Now, it probably should have a bit of weather protection, particularly probably for the fuses. Although on a lot of bikes, really all this stuff does get wet. It's sort of under the seat or tank, but if there's a big downpour, it does get wet. It doesn't seem to be too much of an issue. So I'm going to try and put this in some kind of a electrical box and mount it under the tank. Now, I've been looking at this for a while and I seem to have an extra relay, which got me investigating, and because when I was comparing it to all the manuals and wiring diagrams I could see, there's only two relays. You've got your headlight relay and the starter relay. I did eventually find on the BMW Tech Info website this circuit diagram, and I did remember that this bike had flashes. It had a big flasher button in the middle of the console, and this is the switch cable to it. And it turns out that this relay, which is this one, that's the switch, that's the relay, it's a setup all for the flasher unit, so that you can turn the flasher unit on with the ignition on, and then turn the ignition off, and then the flasher will remain flashing. It's still powered up to hold it on. So all this wiring I've got in pink, I can pull out, and I have to take one of the wires, this one here, and connect it directly up to there, and then it will be exactly as the bikes without the hazards. So that means I can get rid of this guy, which comes through here, and all the wiring. Now that'll simplify it a good amount, and so I'll do that first. Alright, here we go. I'm going to remove the hazard system wiring. This is what I'm trying to remove. It's this part of this harness goes to the flasher hazard button, and this is the relay associated with that, and this is the wiring harness coming through here. It's these two green cables have an inline diode, another inline diode, and according to my reckoning I need to disconnect this, and that goes to the board, and I need to effectively put that in there, replacing these two green and violet cables or wires. And the way you remove these is you poke a screwdriver in here, push down fairly hard, and then pull out the back. That releases that spade connector. So this guy needs to go in there. Just need to remove this outer it's easier said than done. I might have to cut it off. Have the same type of clip, so that should just push right in there. Beautiful. Now, so that's those two disconnected. Now, with this green and yellow, got a green and yellow coming in here, and there's one green and yellow going off via this connector. Into here, which is the left hand handlebar switch. Now that has to stay, but this guy is connected hardwired into that spade, so it's got to be snipped. So first snip, and I'll just cut that close as possible. Right. Now I think that's all the snips, cuts I need to do. So let's go through and do the other disconnections. We'll start at the top, blue and red off the board. blue and red down there. And man, it is so hard to get these out with your fingers. You need first one, a blue and black. Just look it out. How cramped that is. So I'm getting this blue and black out here. This is nuts. Green and violet. Got those disconnected already, I think. That's that one. No, sorry. That's those two there. So there's two of those gone. Green and yellow. That's the one I cut. Then we got two green and blacks. Well, that's those two that I pulled the wire off the diode. Then we got two browns. They're the two browns, and they just go to one connector. That. Then we got the red. This red guy. So my camera stopped filming there. The card was full. The red wire was the last wire to remove, and I did get this out of the bucket. So this is the entirety of the hazard flasher light system. And wasn't too hard to get out. I poked these through one at a time through the hole, and she's all come out. So that can be ditched completely. I also went ahead and have removed the left side switch harness, and I've been noting down where everything goes, and I'll do that to the rest of this so I can start looking at how I'm going to mount that and where I'm going to mount that, and how it's going to fit. I have got this enclosure. This does fit in here reasonably well. So let's see how we go. Okay, so I've got this all apart now. There's the two switch harnesses, handlebar switch harnesses, ignition switch. I've got to work out where to mount that too. This is the headlight relay and connector, and this is the flasher unit. So I've got this board completely removed now. Only thing left to do is to pull out the main harness from the headlight bucket. It's really a matter of one at a time. Through here. Voila. I'm not sure about these headlight buckets, but I do know that the original headlights are quite valuable and you can sell them pretty easily for some decent money. The plan is to put that in there, cut a couple of holes here and here, main harness in here, harnesses to the switches on the other end. Now it would have been good to put this under the seat or even in the ducktail, but to do that I would have to seriously replace a bunch of wires because it's just too far from the headlight and the switches. So I want to try and mount this under the tank towards the front. I may possibly be able to mount some of these relays under the seat. We'll see how we go. There's quite a bit of room under the tank, especially up high, so it may just be easier to put these under the tank. Ignition switch. I'm just going to go with the old-fashioned key arrangement. I need to figure out where to mount this. One option is also under the tank towards the front, sticking out the side. Another option I've seen is actually putting it in the top case of the engine itself. So I'll have to consider those and make a decision. Again, that might need a tab on the frame for that. Okay, I'm just doing a rough fit up of the wiring harness to make sure I've got a plan that works. I've connected up the box to the main harness only. I've left the handlebar switch harnesses out of this. So I'm going to put this here. This is where the voltage regulator normally goes. But there's more room on this side than the other side. I'm going to put this regulator on the other side. There's still enough room for that. So because I've got this extra length of harness, I'm looping this back up. It's going to run along the top tube more neatly than what I've got there, and around the back here. So the harness comes over the frame here. There's plenty of space here. I will cut that bracket off there. That bracket holds on the two relays. One I've ditched. That's the hazard flasher relay. So I'm left with this starter relay. But I'm going to put the voltage regulator here. I'll put a bracket hard up against there, and I'll leave enough room to bolt this guy up as well. And the harness will go in behind where that bracket is now, come out here, go along as shown over to the back. Now I've just got the left hand handlebar switch harness in place just to confirm. If I run that down through there, that will go into that box. There's plenty of length there to do that. So the other run is on the right hand side is slightly shorter, so that'll work. This electronic ignition control unit only mounts up here like this. It's on this manifold for the front brakes, which we're no longer using. I've got them piped up directly. That sits up here, so I'm going to make a simpler bracket to mount that to allow enough room to do this bend here. Apparently this thing gets quite hot, so it needs to have some grease on there for heat transfer to this sink. from there down can be anything. So I'm going to make up my own bracket. Yeah, they're shot absolutely kaput. Top ones look pretty munted as well. Actually, they feel quite a bit better. But those will be getting replaced. You can see that's pretty bad. And there's the top. Now I can finally get to this other rivet here. Okay, I've decided to take the outer races out of the steering head, mainly because it's so grunged up and rusted. I want to get them out now. I'll probably put them back in for the powder coating, because you don't want to get powder coating in there. It's got to be bare metal. I'm using this tool here I made up when I did my R100R, and it's worked okay just on the bottom race. You can see I've already got that a fair way out, just doing it slowly one side to the other. Got to get that curve right there, and also get it really quite nice and sharp to get in there. Now on the top here, I really don't think there's enough of a anything to catch in there. So I'm going to have to probably do the old run a bead of weld around here, and then apparently they drop out. I didn't have to do that on my R100R. I used this tool and it worked great on both sides. I think there's a bit more room on the R100R, it's being a later model. Also getting this guy off, most people chisel that off and then cut it with a Dremel, apply heat and all sorts of shit. What I did on my R100R is it actually had two little holes about here, and I figured out that with a small drift you could tap on those and just push that bearing off, no problem. And I'm actually going to try on this one, I'm going to actually drill a couple of holes and see if I can set this up the same way. Now when you do this, you might have to sand this off a couple of times because it does get worn away, especially at the beginning when you're trying to get it going. Once you've got it out a bit of the way, it's a piece of cake, but trying to get it going in that first little groove there, you want to keep a lot of force on it like this and then give it a tap. Going in the other side, again pushing hard that way. Just be patient. Voila. So on this top one I did end up running a bead of weld around in two spots, and then I used this tool just picking up on those welds to get that out, and came out very easily.
What we looked at is remote area housing.
Voila! There seems to be a decrease in radius as you get past here, and then it increases again. Oh. I don't remember it being like this on my R100R. I might try some heat. Alright, the trick here is going to be to try and get heat into the bearing without heating up the shaft. Voila! That's the dust cover that you normally replace every time you do these bearings. Look at the shit in there. Hardened grease. So that worked pretty well. These are two 4mm holes. On the R100 they're 6mm. No reason you couldn't do 6mm. And they come through on the other side, So in future I'll just have these holes to replace these bearings without having to cut them off or do all the rigmarole that other people do I see on the internet. What I'm going to do while I've got this off is just sand these casting marks away and polish this up. So a huge improvement already. I haven't even got it on the polishing wheel yet. It just looks so much nicer like this rather than having those casting marks. I try to do most of my grinding and sanding work outside if I can. Today is just bucketing down. But I've got this little undercover area here which still allows me to do a little bit. So just a quick go on the polishing wheel and you get the idea. It'll come up really nice. Here's the frame and all the other bits I've got ready to send off to the powder coaters. So I've finished off all the welding on the subframe I needed to do. I've cut off the brackets for the centre stand. I have blanked off these areas on the swing arm where there's threaded holes. You don't want any powder coating in there. I've blanked off these studs here, which is where the shocks mount. I've also blanked off the head end where the bearings go, so bolt through there. Also blocked off the steering lock. Got the tabs on for the horn. That one's for the regulator, that's existing one, that's for one of the relays. This one here is for the electronic ignition control unit. Got all the other little threaded holes blanked off with screws in there, including here. I'll be getting that all off to the powder coaters tomorrow. The swing arm I won't be taking to the powder coaters. I'll be painting this myself. I don't want to disassemble this drive shaft here. It's on with an incredible amount of torque and I'd probably have to take it in somewhere to have it disassembled and also reassembled. And then there's also these bearings here which are still good. I don't really want to replace them, but you can't powder coat with the plastic or rubber in there. It'll be damaged in the heat ovens they use, so they'd have to come out and be replaced. It's easy enough for me to strip this with some paint stripper, and I'll use a nice heavy duty epoxy paint to paint that up.